So, something very strange is happening in Russia. It seems like a wave of arson attacks, and we'll talk about that as the first story here. It is Sunday, December 22nd, 2024. I have 13 and a half big stories for you today, and we'll get right into it. So, a stall with fireworks exploded in the Stavropol region of Russia Federation. The incident occurred in just over the last day, and you can see like the smoke back there. Okay, but let's say fireworks stand could explode. Okay, I get that, but it wasn't just that. It was far more than that. Look, there's this. Several police cars are set on fire in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Sver. Okay, now if it was just one incident, I'd say, okay, something happens. But it seems to be like some kind of connection here. And then you see this, more people are setting fire to ATMs and banks in Russia. Banks are near collapsing and will take everyone's money with them. But set beyond that issue economically, this lady has a match in her hand. And you're like, if you played the video, which I'm not going to play the video for YouTube censors, but you would see boom. Okay. So we're not going to see that. But that's happening there. Then you have a Russian school teacher who threw a Molotov cocktail into a police station in the Vladimir region. Another Russian caught in the act of setting a bank on fire. He was arrested. And so it just keeps like happening. There's more to this. So I'm not sure what is causing a wave of arson, but it is happening. There is this unrest. Maybe it's because of economic unrest. I just don't know exactly what's causing it, and I'm not really wanting to speculate. Another bank, Sberbank, Russia, in St. Petersburg, was blown up by unknown individuals. Russian banks are collapsing and they can kiss their deposits goodbye. It's arson, it's explosions, it's all kinds of things. And the bank's response, right? Due to increasing number of T attacks, the bank has recommended that its clients transfer money from their cards into cash. That's like the worst possible scenario with the ruble doing what the ruble is doing. But yeah, put it all in cash. Let it devalue. I mean, okay, at any rate, this is very strange and we'll keep our eye on it. Meanwhile, we don't want to forget about what's going on in Georgia. This is a rally turnout today in Tbilisi. The protests are still ongoing. Here's another view of that. They're not backing down. Protests against pro-Russian government continue in Georgia. Here's another view of this. Protests demanding fair elections continue daily with the number of participants steadily increasing. I have not shown you, to my knowledge, a repeat clip of these things. These are all different views of this over the last few weeks. So congratulations, Georgians. You're hardcore. You're still out there demanding your rights. Okay, let's turn our attention to something else. In Belgrade, former Yugoslavia, students who have been blockading academic facilities at the University of Belgrade for weeks staged a protest on December 22nd to demand accountability for the collapse of a canopy at the train station. So that's what their protest looks like. It's huge. It looks like Georgia. So a little bit about it. The students who have been blockading this academic facility for weeks now have staged this protest. The demonstration began at 4:30 p.m. local time, 15 minutes of silence for the victims. The collapse on November 1st, which seriously injured 2 people and killing 15. Okay, so that's enough of the protests and the arson and that sort of thing. Let's look at something else. U.S. State Department has just issued a recommendation for U.S. citizens to leave Belarus as soon as possible. Not making this up. Here's the official do not travel advisory from the Department of State. Okay. 10 EU countries now are advocating for another sanctions package. The Baltic countries, Denmark, Ireland, Poland, Romania, Sweden, and the Czech Republic and Finland have all proposed a new package of sanctions against Russia. So they just finished their 15th package, which Orban was trying to scuttle. Now they're on to their potentially 16th package. The initiative focuses on the energy sector, calling for new restrictions and tightening existing ones. This includes banning of import of Russian gas and liquefied natural gas, or gradually reducing their consumption. Well, why is that a problem? Well, Europe in 2024 actually became one of the big importers of liquefied natural gas. And so you see things like this, where Russian President Vladimir Putin had talks in the Kremlin on December December 22nd with Slovak Prime Minister Fico, of one of the few European leaders with whom Putin has maintained ties since Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Well, why is he doing that? Well, he's doing that because for some reason Fico think it's better to be chummy with Putin than with the rest of Europe. But he's upset with Ukraine, with Zelensky, for cutting off Russian natural gas. So is Orban of Hungary. Hungary is negotiating to preserve Russian gas transit through Ukraine. As Ukraine's gas transit agreement is near its end, Hungary's leader reveals talks to maintain the crucial supply route through ownership restructuring. Well, what does ownership restructuring mean? You're going to laugh when you hear this. So here's the actual article in the Euromaidan press. Orban, Hungary is negotiating to preserve Russian gas transit through Ukraine. So what is his stroke of genius? We are now trying the trick that what if the gas, by the time it enters the territory of Ukraine, would no longer be Russian, but would already be the ownership of the buyers, Orban said during the briefing. So the gas that enters Ukraine would no longer be Russian gas, but it would be Hungarian gas. And so if it's Hungarian gas, you can just let it pass through. Now, this is ludicrous. The idea is that Russia's getting paid for that. If Russia wasn't being paid for that, that would be a whole different thing. But you can't just call it something else and then treat it like it. It's bizarre. The situation has raised concern in neighboring countries. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico warned of potential gas crisis due to Ukraine's continued rejection of extending gas transit through its territory amid the ongoing war. Like, you'd think you would have gotten the notice by this point that this is a bad idea and that, they're at war and maybe you need another way of going about getting your gas, but apparently they haven't been that swift. Meanwhile, I saw this message from Europe to Russia and China. We will not defend ourselves. Please do it again, says the chief foreign affairs correspondent of the Wall Street Journal. So he's somebody that you want to pay attention to when he talks, right? And he's looking at this tweet where apparently, as expected, all along, Yipeng 3. Now, remember the lines that were just cut in the Baltic? Well, apparently a Chinese ship went over that, piloted by a Russian captain, and the Yipeng 3 never moved towards Swedish waters. But the Swedish, Danish, German, and Finnish authorities were only allowed on board to observe and not to investigate. They were not able to see the anchor, which the anchor is probably what would have cut it. Chinese investigators were on board as well. But again, Europe just doesn't seem to get the idea that they have to actually do something and step up and have a backbone. Now, I saw this video and I thought it was very good. It's only about a minute long. This is Kolan. Kolan's the guy that did the human safari video. So if you remember that in Kherson, where drones were hunting civilians, and he's walking around by the church that had its windows blown out just a day or two ago, and he's just explaining how the Russians actually act. They're not this traditional values Christian nation. They're not.
Anyone that's watching this from the US that is saying that Putin is Christian, Putin is based Russia, based Catholic, based Christian Russia. Well, the church windows behind me, the historic, beautiful church windows, have been blown to pieces by a Russian missile this morning in the capital of Kyiv. And it's not the only time that the Russians have done this. They have destroyed churches all across this country since 2022. When I was in Izium a few weeks ago, I saw a beautiful monastery that was been destroyed. In Odessa, they destroyed the churches because there is nothing religious about Russia. It is a complete facade, and anyone that thinks that, using this propaganda, Ukraine are throwing priests in prison, Ukraine are, they're anti-Christian. Well, the only priests that this country has arrested are priests that are FSB agents, basically using people going to confession to send their stories back to Moscow. This is a real thing that's happening here. This country is actually religious. People go to church here every Sunday, and a lot of people go to church here every single day. I see that with my own eyes.
So look at what Russia's actually doing. The churches that they're okay with destroying, they also priests in Kherson. Russia is demonic. People like Tucker Carlson, who call Putin a moral hero, should come to Kyiv and see the church that he bombed today. It's a good thought. Now, talking about the Russian economy is just, I can't seem to get away from this. There's problems with the economy and they're sprouting up all over. Just going to show you one today. The largest mobile operator in the Russian Federation, MTS, is going to cut about 2% of its employees. More than 1,200 people out of the 63,000 people employed in the group of companies will be laid off. The operator will also refuse to purchase large assets. So they're not purchasing assets for the future because they're trying to pay off debt because they're not getting the sales because inflation is causing problems. Yeah, MTS explains this by debt. Quote, the key task of MTS in the conditions of a tight monetary policy will be to reduce the debt burden over the next year. In 2025, we will abandon high-cost M&A. M&A is mergers and acquisitions. The company press service reported. Previously, MTS profits fell by 9 times year on year to 1 billion rubles. Wow. So they're in trouble and they know it, but they keep pressing forward anyway with the war. Now let's turn our attention to some American politics related to Ukraine. This is Gary Kasparov saying before Burns and Sullivan, Burns is the CIA chief, and Sullivan, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, write self-serving books. I'd like to see them both under oath explaining how the U.S. bungled Russia's all-out invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and the follow-up. Were there secret deals with Putin to limit assistance? Why so painfully slow? Why costing so many lives? Now, I don't know, and I wouldn't speculate that there is some secret deal, but it's almost like that was going on. I'm not suggesting that that's it at all. It's just what happened. Now, again, I'm sitting in the high seats. I'm not the guy directing it, so I can speculate here, but wow. Okay. Meanwhile, former U.S. President Donald Trump stated that the Russian President Vladimir Putin is eager to meet with him to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. Well, that's not what I'm hearing in other places. On foreign policy, the crazy wars, one of the things I want to address quickly, President Putin has said that he wants to meet with me as soon as possible, so we need to wait for that, and we need to end this war, Trump said. Now, there's something really interesting happening here. Both Trump and Putin are alpha males, but if the negotiation between Zelensky and Putin is being dealt with by Trump, who's above them, that means that Trump is the alpha, and I'm not sure that Putin's going to like that or react very well to this at all. And Putin hasn't said anything like what Trump was saying. Now, both men may be delusional, but I don't think that anything's going to happen magically on January 20th. Trump also reiterated his long-standing claim that had he been president, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine would never have occurred. Now that's what's called a counterfactual. It's relating or expressing what has not happened or is not the case, and you can't possibly know. And they give the example here, if kangaroos had no tails, they would topple over. Well, we don't know because we don't know kangaroos without tails by definition. So who knows? Maybe they would topple over. Maybe Putin wouldn't have invaded, but we don't know. But what we do know is this. According to the Financial Times, Trump wants a 5% NATO defense spending target. Wow. And while we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and we can speculate toward the future, but we have to be very cautious, it could turn out that Trump is actually good for Ukraine. We just don't know yet, and we have to be humble. We also know that Trump plans to continue U.S. military aid to Ukraine after the inauguration. And now I know before the election, people were saying, if you support Trump, you hate Ukraine. Now slow down. And this comment is beautiful. I remember being relentlessly ridiculed and kicked out of both liberal and MAGA spaces for even suggesting this. And yet I was right. Choose who you follow wisely and do it humbly and listen to all sides and try to triangulate on what is truth. Truth matters and accuracy matters. Now, what we also know is that the Germans, who spent the last 70 years as pacifists since World War II, are now raising defense spending. German Defense Minister Pistorius calls for increased defense spending amid rising security concerns. He's emphasized the need to significantly boost Germany's defense budget in light of heightened security threats. Quote, if Putin attacks, we must be able to wage war, Pistorius asserted, highlighting the urgency of the situation. Times have changed, folks. Okay, let's shift gears one more time. Congratulations to Alexander Usyk. He won the heavyweight championship in boxing. And here he is again after successfully defending his title. Usyk raises an actual saber of the 17th century Ukrainian hero, whose name I probably can't pronounce, so I'm not going to try because I don't want to be disrespectful. The 17th century saber was brought by museum officials from Ukraine to Saudi Arabia, especially for this occasion. So, hey, a win's a win. Now, this is a strange story, and I can't really verify it, and I'm telling you that up front. But Chuck Farrer, who's a former SEAL Team 6 squadron leader, posted this, and I thought, well, this is interesting. There are reports that Putin has decided that Bashar al-Assad cannot leave Russia. He cannot engage in political activity, and he has frozen his financial and real estate assets. So I've told you this is a half story because I can't actually verify it. And when I look at major news sources, I just don't see it. Not yet, at least. And so take it with a grain of salt. I saw this and I thought, wow, that's amazing. Amazing Ukrainian drone innovation. Crowdfunded FPV interceptors have helped reduce enemy Lancet drone strikes by 75%. And they're now targeting Shaheeds. I didn't know that they were targeting Shaheeds as well. But look at the Lancet strikes by month here in this chart. It's about 180 in June, 170 in July, 180 in August, and then it drops to 80 in September, and maybe 100 in October, and in November was down to 20. That's remarkable technological innovation. Okay, and you know how I am about drones. We just started this NAFO drone campaign. Greg Terry and I were talking about it. So if you see this video, it has begun. If you want to see all the backstory of what we're doing and why we're doing it, I'll post this at the very end. And our drone campaign kicked off. And by the time we launched it yesterday at 6 p.m., there were $991. There were already 8 donations to it by the time we announced it. And then by the time we got through that video that I was just talking about, and we were like, hey, if you want to give, here's how to give, and we'll show you how to do it. There were $8,000 in donations 1 hour later. And then when I woke up this morning, it was at $26,000. And then I went to church and I came back and it was $36,000 when I got back from church. Right now, it is $47,632. It was supposed to be a $30,000 campaign. We're going to keep pushing this until Christmas. So all these drones will go to the 54th Separate Mechanized Brigade, and these guys need these drones. So if you want to give, there will only be one link below. We are now not quite to 22 hours, and we're at $47,000. Again, the more that's given, the more drones that go out. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.